We are not accustomed to such cruel-blooded affairs in Burlington. Our city and industrial center is composed of hardworking citizens who seldom violate the law. Neighbors, aroused from their slumber by the fusillade of shots, accepted the disturbance as the backfire of some troublesome motor. Even we in the police department found difficulty in charting the most effective course to apprehend such vicious criminals.
You know, I think every officer should have factual information about how this line of duty death occurred, at the very least, out of respect for another officer who lost his life.
In the winter of 1938, 5 men, later known as the Unholy Five, got together to hatch a burglary plan that would simultaneously end the life and service of Sheriff Marcellus Robertson and Patrolman Sonnie Vaughn of Burlington Police Department. The killing of Patrolman Sonnie Vaughn made him the first Burlington police officer to be killed in the line of duty.
Sonnie Vaughn was always, he always had a presence in our police department because there's only one known picture of him, and it was in a plaque in the police department, but nobody really seemed to know a whole lot about the details of who Sonnie Vaughn was. We knew he was an officer with the police department. We knew that he worked sometime in the 30s and that he was killed while he was working, but nobody really knew the exact details.
The 5 men involved in the burglary were known as Roy Huffman, Roy Kelly, the Hanford brothers Ralph and Wade, and George Smith. On October 22, 1938, 2 months before the burglary, a prison break in Anson County yielded 11 escapees, including offenders Roy Kelly and Roy Huffman. In the days leading up to the shooting, Roy Kelly, Roy Huffman, George Smith, and Ralph and Wade Hanford met in Burlington at the Green Top Inn to plan their bust.
There was no actual case report. In fact, I had a family member ask me, where's the case report on Sonnie's death? And I had to really pause and think, there is no case report for us. We don't even know for sure who actually investigated the case. We think the Greensboro Police Department did. We know the FBI was involved, but after so many years, those cases were purged and they're gone. And so our source of information to pull together on this actually relied very heavily on newspapers. And that's how we were able to find out as much as we have.
With access to guns, girlfriends, and bootleg liquor, the 5 men hatched their plan to steal the safe inside of the service station and escape without being caught. What they didn't plan on was being met by 3 officers at the door of the station. The 3 officers, who were responding to suspicious activity reported by a local milkman on his way to work, pulled up to the Sprinkle gas station and were met with gunshots from Roy Huffman's revolver. That night, Roy Huffman shot and killed both Patrolman Sonnie Vaughn and Sheriff Marcellus Robertson, but not without being shot and killed himself by Patrolman Bailiff, who ran for help as soon as Huffman was down.
Can't not acknowledge Marcellus Robertson either, because he was the sheriff of Alamance County for a very brief time. Prior to his services with the sheriff's department, he was a Burlington police officer for 9 years. Sonnie Vaughn and Marcellus Robertson were hired at the same time. And so the sheriff's department, as rightfully so, acknowledges him as an officer killed on line of duty. But but 99% of his career was spent in Burlington as an officer. And a lot of people don't know that either, and it's another aspect of this case that even makes it even more of a reason to acknowledge what happened. So that's why it's hugely important for us to be able to pull this story together and present it to every officer that gets hired with the police department, every officer that works at the police department, every employee that works with the police department, every city employee should know. They need to know when they drive by that corner of Church Street and Trade Street that that's where 2 officers lost their lives. That they need to know that that's almost sacred ground. They should know that that's where it happened. They should know the details of what happened. They should acknowledge anyone that is related to that family in some form or fashion. They may come in contact with them. And can you imagine a family member, how they would feel if they said, my grandfather was Sonnie Vaughn, and an officer just looked at him and said, well, who was Sonnie Vaughn? It's disrespectful to his service if we don't know the details of his sacrifice.
The rest of the offenders escaped and ran as far as they could to avoid getting caught. A manhunt took place from Maryland to Mississippi, involving several police departments, including the FBI. George Smith, who eventually signed a confession and shared each role that the 5 bandits had, was found with Ralph Hanford in Southeast DC on December 11th. On December 19th, Wade Hanford coincidentally was found through a phone call from an emergency hospital in West Virginia through the Burlington Exchange Phone Company. A doctor called looking for Wade's uncle, Edward Hanford, to inform him of the condition of his nephew from a burn accident. Roy Kelly, also known as Slim, went as far as the Mississippi and was found in South Hill, Virginia on New Year's Eve. After all were captured, they stood trial in a special session of night court on April 17, 1939. The Hanford brothers and Roy Kelly were found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to death by gas chamber, while George Smith took a plea of second-degree murder that sentenced him to 25 to 30 years in hard labor.
Chief Jeff Smythe became upset when I told him that the people responsible for this case, they were convicted and sentenced to die in the gas chamber. And within 12 years, they were out of prison. And when I told him that, he became angry. And I said, why are you this angry about what happened? Over 80 years ago, neither one of us had no idea about Burlington 80 years ago. And he just pointed to his patch and he said he was one of my guys. Any police officer, that takes the oath of office, swears or affirms to uphold an oath to protect the community knows that at some point along the line, it may mean sacrificing your life for someone else, and that is the ultimate sacrifice. I mean, if you think about any other profession, first responders actually are willing to step in between the danger that can affect the community and be that barrier. And I think that's how the term the thin blue line came about. I think a line of duty death, there are so many layers of an event that affects people, so it affects them deeply because you may not like the person that you work with, you may not agree with the person you work with, but you know that guy, regardless of differences, it would lay down his life for you. So there's a very strong bond there that exists. We're talking over 80 years ago, and there's still a bond between a guy I never even knew. And we all become affected by the job and what we see on the job. And that's kind of the link, the bond that kind of pulls everybody together. Yeah, we all took the oath, and we all know that we say we would protect our community at any cost, but when you start talking about how these events affect you and you realize, hey, the event was different, but the effect was the same. then you start to realize how much of a bond there is between current officers and older officers and younger officers. And so, one of the goals we hope is that the current employment of officers that we have now, that they understand that there's been hundreds of police officers that have gone before them and experienced events that affected them just the same as they have. And so the causes are different, but the effects are the same.